The liability model has many aspects that are shared by Latin American countries. The liability model has high internal protectionist measures. The high liability model generally practices a domestic interest rate that is much higher than the average of the rates practiced around the world. The liability model privileges the so-called domestic market over overseas market. The liability model is one that understands that exports come from growth and not that growth comes from exports. The trading model is different. The trading model has basically a triple feature that is very important for us to know if we are to step with competition aspects in the global economy. One, trading nations have established a privileged access to huge buying markets by free trade agreements. So this is key. A trading nation will not go about as competitive as it can be without a major agreement with an important buying market. Number two, trading nations go about dealing with public and private partnerships in order to build a very friendly legislation to foreign direct investment. Because endogenous virtual cycles of growth come from very high foreign direct investment, coupled with huge trade surpluses, coupled with an export capacity that is robust. And coupled, of course, with the public-private partnerships is what we could call a business grade. There is much talk in Latin America these days about the investment grade. In Brazil, for example, everyone is celebrating the investment grade that is sure to come sometime between now and the end of the year. Peru recently got the investment grade. And the investment grade is great, but it's not enough because the investment grade is basically about institutional investors that have some difficulties in placing their capital in countries where AAA characteristics are not present. But what about the business grade? In one of the presentations here today, one was talking about how long it takes to open a business in Brazil or to close a business in Brazil, or how many legal and bureaucratic procedure one has to go about if one wants to be a businessman in one of our Latin American countries. So coupled with public partnership agreements, we have to have the business grade. And third, and very importantly, trading nations become very aggressive business diplomats. And I don't know how many of you know the city of São Paulo, but in the very corner of the most important business avenue of São Paulo, Avenida Paulista, there is a building called the China Trade Center. It's a 14-story building. And that building alone, 1,000 Chinese work towards attracting Brazilian investment to China, foreign direct investment. And this is not portfolio investment, the one investment that transferred science and technology, plants, machinery, etc. And of course, to promote Chinese exports of value-added growth, very, very high value added to the Brazilian market. If you go to the Brazilian consulate in Shanghai, the trade section and the trade promotion section is made up of one person. So the wars in what we call business diplomacy are being fought by armies that have very, very, very different volumes. And of course, this is part of a political decision. I think it's very important that we mention these things because otherwise we're going to get carried away by a number of concepts that make sense when you're talking about international statistics, but that don't really make sense when it comes to building a strategy. Such as the concept of BRICS, for example. What do BRICS countries have in common? They're big. They have big territory, big populations. They have a considerable GNP. But there's nothing new. In the 1950s, the great American diplomat George Frost Kennan used to call these countries the monster countries. There's nothing new there. What is different is that some countries have decided to go about the political economy of globalization with a plan. And this plan has converted them to true trading nations. What we need in our countries, and of course the countries of Latin America, is what we do in companies. We need a business plan. And this business plan, in my opinion, has to adapt the trading nation model as the one through which we're going to build the necessary capital stock that will act as the platform from which we are going to have our own indigenous capacity to do the things that Secretary General Souza was mentioning here, investing 2 or 3% of our GDP in research and development, uniting universities and corporations, and also, and I think this is key, giving the entrepreneurial and creative and joy side of the peoples of Latin America with the necessary capital tools and knowledge tools to grow, not because of creative destruction, but because of creative adaptation. Today, we are only growing because we are adapting ourselves to a situation where one particular player is a great consumer of our century-long tradition of producing commodities. If one was to read the name of this conference applied to the kind of growth that we're having in Latin America, we're not growing because of innovation. We're growing because of adaptation. There's no problem with that. You can adapt to grow, but this is only short term. There's going to be a cycle in the global economy, and it will hit us. And the best counter-cyclical tool that we can have is creating our own endogenous growth by means of creative destruction. That is to mention Schumpeter, who was a professor at Harvard many years ago. We need a business model. And I'd like to finish my talk by remembering a couple of days from now, we're going to host a show in New York at the United Nations on the 50 years of the Bossa Nova movement. And there was a beautiful song on Bossa Nova composed by Marcos Valle that read in Portuguese, "The same feet that dances the samba, if needed, takes a fight." And this is what we're going to have to do with the countries of Latin America. Take a fight towards building business plans so that our nations can become trading nations. Thank you.